Hello. Today I want to talk to you about the power of opposites. This is something that I learnt a long, long time ago. I was at a conference with my then boss, and we were delivering some workshops to an organisation that I won't name, but let's say it had a reputation for being very organised, very focused, and very good at what they do. And also very different from the small consultancy firm that I worked for at the time. This company employed a lot of very clever people who tended to be very focused on the technicalities of their role and less so on some of the things we might refer to as soft skills, which was why we were there in the first place. And after a couple of days in company with this organisation, it's very, very different from our own culture. We kind of exchanged a look one day and said, kind of looking forward to getting out of here. And then my boss said something that stayed with me, and he said, OK, so maybe we don't like the way they run things in this organisation, but what can we learn from it? And that actually occupied us for most of the journey home, thinking about, well, what could we learn from that? And there were some really useful things that came out of that conversation, some of which actually became part of the small company's culture. So I often think about that. And sometimes when we're faced with situations where there's something that feels uncomfortable or feels as though it's really not going in the normal way of things, it's sort of going against the grain, sometimes I stop and think to myself, OK, so if this really isn't me, this really isn't my style of doing things, that's OK, but is there something I can learn from it? Because there's always power in looking at the opposite of what you do. So, for example, one of the things that I do quite a lot of is leadership development. And if you have responsibility for developing people, if you have responsibility as manager or leader of a team, then you'll know that this is something that's never kind of finished. You never get to a point where you say, OK, I know about leadership, I can do it now. There's always new things coming up. So looking at leadership development, one of the things I find quite interesting to do is to look at role models. And often people can learn a lot about their own leadership style and how to develop it by looking at the role models, the people who they have been led by, people who they've followed willingly, and thinking about, well, what was it about the way that person operated that I really liked and that made me want to be part of their team, made me want to do my best for them, and in fact enabled me to do my best for them. Now, if we look at the power of opposites, you can also say, who are the people that I've worked for, who've been my team leader, who've been my boss, who I didn't really like their style. I didn't get on with it. I didn't feel like I wanted to do my best for that person, or I didn't feel I was able to do my best in the environment that was created by that particular leader. And so you could say, right, well, what can I learn from that? OK, the simple thing is I can learn I don't want to do it that way. And that can be a useful lesson. So if you worked for someone who had a habit of doing something that just didn't work for the people that worked for them, then yes, you can say, right, I need to remember not to do that. But also, even though you don't like it, is there something that person used to do that, however reluctantly, you might actually be able to say, you know, if I did that, I could probably get some better results than I'm getting. So you may not have liked working for someone who was very good at confrontational conversations, who was very good at calling out the problems, very good at telling people when they hadn't got it right. And you might say to yourself, right, I never want to do that. I'm not going to be particularly aggressive with people. I'm not going to be critical and so on. But you could also, perhaps from that, say, but are there times when I shy away from saying something that I ought to say? Are there times when I let something go because it's easier than stopping and saying, actually, this isn't working? And so maybe in those circumstances, there is something to learn, even if we don't like the entirety of the way somebody else operates. So that's just a little bit of food for thought. So when you find yourself in a situation in the coming days or weeks where something registers as, I don't really like that, that wouldn't work for me, how about just stopping for a moment and asking yourself, but is there something I could learn from this? Have fun.